welcome to Fox Valley in Focus. I'm your host, Barb Nadeau, and on today's show we have three guests. Aaron Ribsky, who is the Director of Environmental Health for the Kendall County Health Department, Steve Karate, the Program Administrator for the Kendall County Health Department, and a local author, Jean Valentine, here to talk about her newest book. We'll get started with our interview with Aaron in just a second.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Aaron Ribsky is our first guest today. Aaron is the Director of Environmental Health Services, which covers a lot.
It sure does.
But today he's here to talk about January being Radon Action Month, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to talk about radon.
You really do have a big job. It does cover a lot, from restaurants and food safety and just all
and
sorts of things.
septics and all sorts of things. We really are looking at environmental hazards that can affect public health, and that's our principal focus.
Well, I knew I wanted to have you on because we need these monthly reminders of things that we just drag our feet doing. And January being the month that we try to recognize radon as a hazard, it's a good time of year to do it, I think. Start of the new year, start of good intentions. So I wanted to ask you again, what is radon? And before the show, you told me there's a lot of changes in what we know about radon. So first, what is radon and why should we be concerned?
Well, radon is an odorless, colorless, invisible gas that seeps into homes. It seeps out of the ground naturally from the natural decay of uranium in the soil. No big deal.
Somehow it gets in our house.
Well, this is the thing. We happen to put our homes in contact with the ground. we dig in basements, and that's where you have that interface between the ground and the home. And of course, you've got radon that potentially can seep into a home through cracks in the basement, through sump pits, that sort of thing, underneath the foundation, and it can seep into the home, and it ends up concentrating in the home as the air kind of collects and sits in that home, especially in times of the year when you're not really opening windows and airing out the house. Hence, January being Radon Action Month.
So naturally, out if you take a walk in the woods, there could be radon, just everywhere, but it's so diluted that it doesn't. But when you seal your house, you seal your windows, you've sealed everything. What about sealing your basement? Doesn't that work?
It could. It could, absolutely. So when you're looking at the radon risks and you're considering, maybe I've got you've already done some testing, you've got a slight problem, you can seal up the basement, and that may solve your problem. Sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what kind of concentration you've got coming up underneath your home, and that can vary widely, even from lot to lot to lot. So there's, that could definitely play into it. You can reduce radon by sealing up your basement, but more often than not, you have to have some sort of mitigation system.
Now, new homes should have a mitigation system, and I think there's a lot of older homes that don't, and that's, again, people drag their feet. They don't want to do it because it sounds kind of mysterious. It sounds like an expense. So tell me a little bit more about how much does it cost to get your house tested?
Well, to test your home, it costs, you could do it in a few different ways. The first and cheapest way is you can come to the Kendall County Health Department. We sell test kits for $6. These are short-term test kits. The instructions are there, prepaid shipping, the whole 9 yards, and they really take a snapshot of what's going on in your house with radon. You can go to a hardware store and purchase the same test, the same type of test. It's probably going to cost $15, maybe more than that.
So go to the health department.
You could, and it's totally up to you, though. I mean, we're not saying you have to. Or you can go with a professional tester, and they can actually do long-term testing where they can see the levels fluctuate. We've learned that just this last year we were at trainings where we learned that with these new devices that can measure radon levels can jump up and down and up and down. It could be a very low count one day, and it could be extremely high the next day. It can be affected by rain events. There are lots of different things that we're just starting to learn about fluctuations in a home. Now, the really interesting thing is each home is its own unique case. So it's whatever kinds of cracks are in the basement, whatever kinds of air handling or air movement in the home, that changes kind of what's going on. So every home is unique.
It sounds like even if you have a new home, you may not really have it under control.
Quite possibly not. In 2012, the Radon-Resistant Construction Act went into effect in Illinois. And what that required was that passive mitigation systems, which is the first type of mitigation you can do. It's basically you want to get the air out of the home, out of the basement, out from underneath the foundation. So they would put just a standard pipe, PVC pipe. They drill through the foundation, put this pipe in, and run it out of the house, relying on the natural movement of air to just sort of move right through the house from underneath the foundation and out. But sometimes that doesn't work. There's a lot of things to consider. When you take it apart, it's not rocket science. You need to have movement of air through a pipe. You need to have movement of air underneath the foundation. Depending on what's underneath the foundation, this may or may not be...
May not even work.
May not work. And it's possible that during construction, maybe it wasn't installed properly. It's a tough thing to tell. So we strongly recommend, even people who have those passive mitigation systems, and it should be every single family home after 2012, gets tested just to see what your levels are at. It's always a good thing to be testing because, again, each home is unique. As air movement can change in a home, let's say you change out your heater or your air conditioner or whatever you have, that can change the way air moves. And we strongly recommend testing. Again, it only costs $6 for a test kit, at least through the health department. So it's not a big expense. It's a pretty easy thing to do for that peace of mind. An important thing to remember with radon too is this is a long-term situation.
It's a long-term health risk, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because it is a radioactive gas and it is something that could cause cancer, lung cancer.
Exactly. It increases the risk for developing lung cancer. But it's kind of like the opposite of like carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, it gets into a house, it can knock you out very quickly. It's a very serious acute health problem. It's very bad, very fast. Radon, you need that exposure for a long period of time, and it just raises the risk and raises the risk. So that is why sometimes it's difficult to get the point through to some people. This might increase the risk maybe in 30 years. But yeah, it's definitely a concern, especially in this area.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that our area of northern Illinois seems to be very high at risk or high concentration of radon, in this area. I just think that's kind of interesting to me. It's also very interesting to me that the health department is really focusing on so many of these different areas. And when I go to your website, would I see information about radon? Do you have like supporting material to help me, understand this process, understand some of my choices? Because you've really outlined so many different choices here.
Well, yes, we do have this information on our website. You'd have to go to our website at kendallhealth.org. Click on the Environmental Health tab, and you should be able to find radon in that list. And you can look at our page. It actually has a coupon for $1 off the radon test kit.
Now it's even better.
Oh yeah,
There's no excuse.
No excuse, no excuse. But it's got even YouTube clips. It's got diagrams. It kind of shows what's going on. This has been a recognized risk for 40 years in different parts of the country, and really we want to get the word out. I think. In the past 10 years, I think more and more people are starting to hear about this.
Thank you so much.
It's exciting.
Thank you so much for being here to tell us about that and reminding us so much important information to share with you today on our show. Thank you, Erin, and we'll be back with more. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Steve Karate joins us now. Steve is the program administrator for the Kendall County Health Department. And Steve, that means you've got a lot of things underneath your supervision.
Yes. I would say it's probably the most diverse and variety-filled position in the building, and I'm blessed with that.
Well, I also think that our health department is one of the most diverse health departments in the area. And I think that's kind of interesting that health departments, people have a preconceived notion of what a health department should be, but here in Kendall County, it's become an umbrella for so many social services that
Yeah.
people need.
Yeah, I mean, we really try to provide a holistic approach to health and well-being. Seriously, the Kendall County Health Department is a one-stop shop. Mental health, environmental health, physical health.
Health in our businesses, in our work
yeah.
environments, everything.
Socioeconomic health and well-being, the duress that we feel when we're not making ends meet, all of those bits and pieces we manage to address and serve the community with.
Well, that's why I feel really, really blessed today to have a chance to talk to you about
Thank
the
you.
2020 census.
Yeah.
Because that's coming on, the radar here in the next couple months. We're going to hear more about it, and then we're actually going to have to act. And why are we doing this? So I want to ask you about the census. What is it, and how often do we do it?
Yeah, I want to say being on this morning is a really great experience because I've taken the census before. I'm not going to say how many times because I don't want to date myself. But, to me, it was a survey, and it was for general information on demographics in our community and in our state and in our nation. But coming on, I did a pretty deep dive into the history of the census, and it just is really interesting. I would recommend anybody look at some of the history of it. We've been taking the census since 1790, every 10 years. In general terms, it is a national head count, and it is mandated by the Constitution. And again, we do it every 10 years. So it's very important and significant that we participate in this now because the results of this will have a lasting impact of 10 years ahead.
But it's not back in, the early days, it really was a head count. Now, as you said, it becomes a real look at who you are. It gets into demographics and some other things. What are they going to be asking?
Well, the important aspect of this is to count the population and to count the population where we are. The purpose of this is really threefold. First and foremost, and this has always been the case, is that it helps determine the numbers of representatives that we'll have from Illinois serving in the U.S. House of Representatives.
So at the basic level, it's a government.
Correct. It's for our representation. So when you look at it that way, right now we've always had 435 House of Representatives, 18 of which are from Illinois. If we are unrepresented in terms of the census count, if we're missing individuals, that number could drop.
And that could affect our voice.
Absolutely. So that's extremely important. The locations of where people are, that will have an impact on our congressional and our state legislative districts. And that is very important in terms of our state and even our locale being represented fairly. But I think where it really hits home for us at Health and Human Services at the Health Department is that there's a large bearing on the determination and guidance of federal resources.
Okay, so explain that to me. Why do I care about how federal resources are allocated?
Well, we are hoping to get a share of resources, of funding that will be in alignment with the need of our community. In other words, there are a number of services that we provide that rely on federal funding that help serve our community in a number of different ways. Homeless prevention is a great example. Our allotment of dollars to serve the homeless, to try and help them develop a self-sustaining living situation, is predicated in large part on the census figures. So again, if people don't fill out the census, if we're underrepresented, we will see either a stagnation in what we're receiving now, or worst case scenario, a drop in those funds.
What are some of the other funds, some of the other social issues that are affected by, or actually benefited by federal dollars that could be affected if they don't have the right count?
Yeah, you start off with infrastructure in our community. We're talking about everything from roads to public transportation, where schools are put, libraries, senior centers. There's a lot of infrastructure here that is going to be determined based on the final census count.
And I think that things like, you did mention transportation, you know, some things like being able to have access to buses, or you look at some of the programs like Senior Services Associates that do so many things for our elders, you know, what programs they have, and there's federal dollars coming in to help that. The poor, community action, weatherization help, scholarships for youth, all of those things are coming, money's coming from the federal government for those.
Yeah, in large part, there's a lot of support coming from those dollars, which all roads lead back to the census in that count. And another layer to it, too, is our large corporations, our local business enterprises. They are looking at this census data to determine where they may set up house.
So it could affect our jobs, or whether or not we're going to have new jobs in our community.
Absolutely. So I think that's a very important piece to put out there too. You know, job development is a part of this, and something that we always are in need of.
So the census is coming up, is it the end of March, early April?
Yeah, interestingly, the census started, it started a year ago with the canvassing of neighborhoods and areas to verify addresses. And then the actual census taking will begin at the beginning of January in Alaska, where a team will go out on foot and try and gather census information before the spring thaw.
As a story issue, it's interesting to me that some people in the most rural places are going to actually have people coming to their door because they're hard to find.
Right.
But most of us are really going to get something in the mail or on the phone.
Yeah, so the way it'll work out here is sometime around mid-March, we will all receive, those of us who have access to mail, will receive a mailing that provides a website. This is the first census that is going to allow for full completion of the census on the internet, on an iPad, and I believe on a cell phone as well too. Now the paper form is still available, and the idea with the paper now is to provide that to those individuals who don't have access to mail. And then there's also, I believe, going to be an option for phoning it in. So you can go through the convenience of using the phone and answering questions over the phone. But the real push here is to have people complete it using the internet. There are 10 questions that are provided. And I do want to say that very importantly, the information that's gathered for the census is considered private and confidential. And it is in two different ways. First and foremost, the census takers are sworn to holding that information private. They will not be allowed to share that information with other government agencies. Immigration, the FBI, the IRS. This is purely Census Bureau information held under seal and cover. The other interesting fact is that the census forms themselves are kept under lock and key for 72 years.
Oh my gosh.
72 years before they can be released. And they are used at that point for genealogy and for other odds and ends. But
this is fascinating. I could talk with you forever. I hate to say it though, I have one more guest and I have to break our interview.
Okay.
But you were telling me censusillinois.com.
Illinois Census 2020.
Illinois Census
Illinois
2020.
Census 2020.
It's a fascinating place to visit, and I think it's going to be a fascinating ride through these next few months. Thank you so much for telling us all about this.
Thank you for the opportunity, and take that census.
Okay, thank you, and we'll be right back right after this.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving. Caring for a family member can be challenging and lead to countless questions for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Our final guest today is Jean Valentine. She is the Adult Services Manager at Plano Community Library. She's also an author. I'm holding your second book, Jean, Better Than the Reaper, and it's an interesting look into the history of the city of Plano, our local history. Thanks for coming to talk about it.
Thanks for having me.
You started, your first book was a historical book about the city of Plano.
Yes, Plano Images of America I did with Ann Sears and Christy Laurie Gravlin, and it's a photo history book of Plano.
And now you've delved into actually writing a full book yourself. It has a lot of pictures in it, but it is really a fascinating book. What made you decide to do this?
When we did the other book, Ann and Christy assigned me the chapter on the harvester manufacturing history of Plano. And I just became fascinated with that whole thing, the invention and the manufacture of harvesters in Plano over about a 60-year period. And it caused me to just keep researching after that book was done, and this was the result.
I ran right out and bought it as soon as it came out because I was enthralled by the title, Better Than the Reaper, because that's just a piece of Plano history that people like or they don't like. You know, oh, get over it, you know, the Reaper's ancient history. But it really becomes a very interesting read into finance, into trade wars. You know, it's
Right.
fun. It's fun to realize how complex the whole situation was and what was going on. So can you give us a little bit of a synopsis of what we're going to find inside?
Well, the important thing, of course, is that there was a need for an improvement on the Reaper that McCormick had invented. They wanted new innovations for labor-saving purposes and money-saving purposes. And two brothers from DeKalb County were working on this invention, and they decided to call it a harvester instead of a reaper. But they couldn't quite get it right, and they came to Plano, and with help from people in Plano, they made it so it actually worked. It could be manufactured and would actually be, you know, usable, and the first harvester factory was built in Plano, and then it became a really important part of Plano's economy over 60 years.
It's also a story of a lot of ingenuity, you know,
Yes.
and I think sometimes when we look to simpler times, we think of them as simpler times in the past, but really they were being very creative, very scientific, very industrious in how they were going about their business, and it was serious business because they needed the food.
Right, and part of the impetus, when you think about the time, especially like the 1850s and 1860s, and that first patent was was like 1858, but the 1860s, the Civil War was going on, and there was a lack of labor. So there was extra reason for them to want to have labor-saving devices for harvesting because a lot of the men were gone. So that was a part of the reason I think there was that push then. But then there was constant innovation, as you say, throughout the decades.
A little bit of business wheeling and dealing and arguing back and forth over who had it, but also I think anybody who is interested in business and interested in manufacturing would find this look back into history to be an interesting read. What has been the reaction to the book?
Most people will say, you know, if they're interested in this topic, then they're really happy that someone took the time to really delve into it and specific to Plano. The book really is very much specific to Plano, and I didn't try to cover, you know, manufacturing history any broader than that. I did mention in there that Plano does have a connection with International Harvester, but it was never, it wasn't located in Plano, but it has a very specific connection, and that's covered in the book.
And some of these locales still exist today, so we drive past them every day.
The buildings are still there and in use for other factory purposes or other businesses.
Did you ever think that you'd become an author?
No, I really didn't until about maybe 12 years ago.
And I know that you have a very active writers group there,
Yes.
and a lot of encouragement for local authors to come forward and do things, and I think that's great. But you were telling me right before we went on the air that you're actually working on a third book now. So you've got the bug.
Yes, I definitely do, and the writers group is a big part of that. It's an encouragement, and it encourages us to go ahead and write more, but then we help each other in the process, and that's important.
So when does the writers group meet?
The second and fourth Thursdays of each month, except for November and December when there are holidays, but the other months it's the second and fourth Thursday.
Okay.
And the second Thursday of November
In
and
the evening?
December. 6:30 to 8 o'clock at the library in Plano.
And what kind of people show up at the writers group? Is it a large group?
Usually somewhere between 8 and 12 people come. Writers of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, children's things, so a really variety, and a variety of ages too, from young adults to retirees.
And out of that group, you've had several people actually successfully publish.
We've had some, yeah.
Which is really,
Yeah.
I think interesting and unique. But I think this idea of writing is not passé. I mean, nowadays everybody just texts or they just real quick on social media. But there's really a need for people to write their stories.
Right, and we had one author whose writing was all on her blog, so that's an up-to-date kind of way for writing, people to be writing without necessarily publishing in hard copies.
So not everybody's going to go towards being a published author with a book.
Book, right, they might have a blog or something else.
You're now going into fiction. So can you give us any hints? Or do you not want to?
I just started a novel. We'll see where it goes.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's going to be something that I'm going to successfully complete and be happy with, but we will see. I've been really busy helping one of our other writers edit his book that's coming out next year, and so we're working on that. And I can thank our writers group for the title of this book. It was actually one of the group members that suggested the title.
The Better Than the Reaper. And where can we get The Better Than the Reaper?
You can get it at Plano Library, or you can order it off of Amazon.
Okay, well that's good to know that it is available. I mean, I bought mine at the library. I always like going into our library. And I think it's been interesting just talking this last half hour with our first guest, Erin, talking about our environmental health, and then Steve talking about the importance of the census and the history of where we're going, and then, to end up the show talking to you about the history of Plano, and then also, just looking into the future, all the future endeavors that you have and others have. So, I don't know, I'm a great history buff myself, but you're there located in that beautiful Carnegie Library that is unique all its own. So I had to buy your book at the library.
We appreciate that. If you buy it at the library does get the proceeds from the book.
All right, so then you're helping the Plano Library. Well, Jean, thank you so much for
Thanks
sharing
for having
this.
me.
Thanks for doing this for all of us. And with that, we're going to say goodbye for today. It's always a pleasure to be here for Fox Valley Television. I'm Barb Nadeau.